Welcome to monobiology. In this lesson, we're going to learn about the process of photosynthesis. This is an introductory lesson. There are much more details about photosynthesis that we are not going to discuss in great detail in this lesson. So for those of you taking Bio 11, this is for you guys mostly. For those of you taking AP, if you're watching this, then there's a lot more you're going to need to learn. But this is a good start. So what is photosynthesis? And you have a sheet that has some information on that you're going to use to write some notes. This is a process where carbon dioxide and water are combined using light as an energy source to make carbohydrates and oxygen. So let's have a quick look here at what's happening in this picture. As you can see, this particular picture shows us how the sunlight is absorbed by the green parts of the plants. It can also be algae. There's various different organisms that can use photosynthesis. Plants are the ones we're probably going to focus on the most in this course. But you can see the leaf in this case is absorbing the sunlight, specifically the chlorophyll, which is the green pigment that photosynthesis works best with. And it essentially says it traps the light. It absorbs the light. It absorbs the energy from the light. And that energy is then converted into ATP, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But you can see here that this plant is taking up water from its roots and carbon dioxide, which enters through the stomata of the leaves. Now, if you haven't watched the leaf diagram video yet, you should do that because this will make a lot more sense if you do that. Now, in the end, the plant takes in those three things and gives off sugar, which is the food for the plant, which is the whole purpose of photosynthesis, and oxygen. And in fact, photosynthesis literally means making food using light. That word means light, photo means light, and synthesis means to make. So it means to make food using light as an energy source. Now that sugar that the plants make in the process of photosynthesis can either be stored or used. If it's stored in plants, they store it as starch. And we're going to have an opportunity a little bit later on, if we haven't done so already, to look at what types of parts of plants have starch. Now, you know of starchy foods. You've heard of that before. So like your wheats, things like that, like pastas have a lot of starch, but also potatoes. Potatoes have a lot of starches as well. All right, so what is the equation for photosynthesis? Well, we have a general equation here, and I'm not worried about you guys writing a balanced chemical equation. You can see there's a 6 here and a 6 here. I don't care about that. You can just kind of remember just the basics. So carbon dioxide and water, in the presence of light, so you have to have light, are able to be converted into glucose, which is a 6-carbon sugar, and oxygen. Right now, oxygen essentially in this process, believe it or not, is actually a waste product. It's not something that the plant is intending to make. However, it is an important piece of the puzzle too, because without this oxygen, the plant then wouldn't be able to use cellular respiration, which we've talked about already, to be able to convert this glucose into the 36 ATP that it needs. Another thing you should probably notice about this particular equation is that it's actually the reverse of the cellular respiration equation. In other words, if the arrow was instead going this way, and these were my reactants, and these were my products, it would in fact be the cellular respiration CR, that's supposed to be an R. There we go. Cellular respiration equation if it was going the other way in that direction. Okay, so they're opposites. The products of one are the reactants of the other, and vice versa. Now, photosynthesis involves two distinct sets of reactions. One of those sets of reactions, which is known as the light-dependent reactions, takes place in what is known as the thylakoids, which are these things here, of the chloroplast. Right? Obviously, photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplast. This guy here, this big green thing here is the chloroplast. It's not that big in real life, obviously. So the light-dependent reactions take place in these thylakoids. The light-independent reactions, which just simply means it doesn't require any light, take place also in the chloroplast, but in another part of the chloroplast called the stroma, which is kind of all this like gel-like substance that's in between the thylakoids. So those particular reactions, both of which make up photosynthesis, take place in the chloroplast. And we're going to look a little bit at each of those now. All right, so we have the light-dependent reactions, which require light. That's what that means. And these reactions allow ATP to be generated using sunlight. This ATP will be used to help convert carbon dioxide and water into sugar. Okay, so step one of photosynthesis is to make some ATP. And ATP, as you know, is cellular energy. Cells can't do anything unless they have ATP. Anything that requires energy requires ATP. So to make sugar, that requires ATP. So it's really cool. The plant can actually convert chemicals that it already has into ATP using sunlight. That's not something animals can do, but that's something that plants and algae can do. And it's all because of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll allows that to happen. It's a pigment that's able to absorb the light. Now, the process by which this happens is actually much more sophisticated than what we're going to talk about here. Suffice it to say that it's very similar to the electron transport chain in cellular respiration. The sunlight energizes or excites electrons, which then go through an electron transport chain, which allows ATP to be generated. Now, in this process, water is actually going to be converted into oxygen. Now, I know that's kind of weird, because where did the hydrogens go? Well, the hydrogens are eventually going to be used later on to make the sugar. All right, so the hydrogens don't disappear, but we do get oxygen at the end of the light-dependent reactions. And remember, that's a waste product of this particular process. Okay, so we're not going to get into all the details of this stuff here, but suffice it to say is that the purpose of this reaction, the light-dependent reactions, is to make ATP. We're going to use that ATP in the next step. The light-independent reactions. Now here's a nice little graphic of kind of how these two reactions are set up in the chloroplast. You've got the thylakoids where the light-dependent reactions occur, and then you've got the stroma, which is all this jelly-like substance in here around the thylakoids where the Calvin cycle takes place. Okay, so the light reactions donate ATP to the Calvin cycle. This is where the CO2 that came in through the leaf, through the stomata of the leaf, is actually going to be combined with the hydrogens that we had from here to make sugar. And that sugar that's going to be made is glucose. Okay, so the Calvin cycle, again, is a very sophisticated set. It's a set of reactions, very similar almost to the Krebs cycle. Obviously, different kind of enzymes and different products and reactants are made, but it's a cycle, right? So it goes around in a cycle, and it's a series of reactions. Okay, and as the reactions proceed, eventually the plant makes a sugar molecule. Now this sugar molecule is just a CH2O. To do that, we need 6 of those. 6 of those together would make C6H12O6, which of course is glucose. Okay, so it has to go through several times. So we need 6 CO2s. That's where the 6 CO2 comes from in the balanced chemical equation. But anyway, we need 6 of those to make 6 of these, and those are going to be combined to make one glucose molecule. And remember, the whole purpose of this process is to make the sugar, and the sugar is the food for the plant. Without that food, not only would the plant not survive, but think of the food chains. Every food chain starts with a producer, an autotroph, something that can make its own food. Without those autotrophs at the bottom of the food chain itself would collapse and nothing would exist. That includes us. That includes every single animal on the face of the planet. Right? So this process here is very, very significant, very important to every living thing. That, in a nutshell, is photosynthesis. Bring your questions to class as well as your sheet that you filled in.